Calling the Cuyahoga County Committee of the Whole meeting to order for Tuesday, July the 10th, 2018. Clerk, please call the roll.
Calling the roll, Mr. Schron. Here. Ms. Conwell.
Present.
Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones is absent at the moment. Ms. Brown. Ms. Brown is absent at the moment. Mr. Hauser.
Here.
Ms. Simon. Ms. Baker.
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Here.
Mr. Tuma. Mr. Tuma is absent at the moment. Mr. Gallagher.
Here.
And Council President Brady.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Is there any public comment?
No one has signed in.
All right. The fourth item, we have a confirmation hearing today. Welcome to the confirmation hearing at which the council will consider the appointment of Michelle Pomerantz as Director of the Department of Regional Collaboration. The Department of Regional Collaboration was established by council in February of 2011. Ms. Pomerantz will assume the position of Director upon council confirmation. The hearing process will proceed as follows. The nominee will be offered an opportunity to address her qualifications, motivations for seeking the position, and plans regarding the office. Council members will then be offered the opportunity to ask questions of the nominee. We will do so in rounds, allowing each council member to ask 2 questions per round until all council questions have been answered. Once all questions have been asked, we will entertain a motion to recommend that council approve or reject the nomination. If we are not ready to act on that motion today, we will defer making the recommendation. Assuming a motion to recommend approval or rejection has been made, the council will vote on that recommendation at today's regular meeting. Thank you, and let's begin. Ask the clerk, would you please read the resolution?
Resolution number 2018-0121, confirming the county executive's appointment of Michelle Pomerantz upon her taking the oath of office as Director of the Department of Regional Collaboration and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
Ms. Pomerantz, please come forward. Good to see you. Make yourself comfortable. Hopefully.
Great, thank you.
Is that working?
I think so, yep.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, President Brady, for the opportunity to speak to you today. I am thrilled to be considered for this role and to join the team at Cuyahoga County. Thanks also, Councilman Miller, for co-sponsoring the nomination. I plan to speak briefly about my work experience and history and hope to use the rest of this time to listen to any comments or answer any questions that you might have. I've been an educator for the Cleveland schools, a labor leader for the Cleveland Teachers Union, the Deputy Director for the Office of the President of the American Federation of Teachers, and most recently, the Education Policy and Labor Liaison for the CEO of the Cleveland Metropolitan School District. As a teacher, I taught first grade for 22 years and am still closely connected to most of my former first grade students and their families. During that time, I volunteered with the Cleveland Teachers Union and under the leadership of President David Kolke, rose through the ranks to become the Director of Political Action, which gave me the role of organizing members, legislative advocacy, community engagement, and managing state and federal budgets and campaigns. The networking, collaboration, execution, and communication required for this work helped me grow, and although I was still teaching at the time, I learned ways to connect to educators, community leaders, and legislators toward greater outcomes in elections and in the classroom. It was through this work that I was recruited to leave the classroom and become the Deputy Director for the President of the American Federation of Teachers, which is one of the 2 national teachers unions in the country. I moved to Washington, D.C. and worked directly with the President to collaborate and connect labor leaders across the country to the initiatives of the President. I had the opportunity to use the organization and communication skills to connect the local union president to members and districts across the United States to move AFT's mission to support public education and educators in the classroom. I learned about the national education reform and also the federal budget process as well. My current position is serving as the CEO of Cleveland Schools, Eric Gordon's Policy and Labor Liaison. Here I've used my leadership strengths to promote collaboration between all of the members of Cleveland City Council, the local delegation of legislative leaders, and community constituency groups to ensure quality communication, follow up with any and all matters regarding the school district, and to give the internal members of the Cleveland School District's bureaucracy an opportunity to learn more that the community can offer. This work has given me a chance to work across sectors of school construction, human resources, finance, academic planning, and community engagement. I'm also the lobbyist for the Cleveland Metropolitan School District and have been successful in advocating for legislation and budget requests that enhance the finances of the school district, as well as creating legislation that benefits the goals of the Cleveland Plan and the CEO and the Board of Education. Some of the work that I have done includes minimizing negative legislation or finding ways to collect data and community support so that the legislators understand what it would look like in practice, and then to make sure the modifications or amendment to legislation. This work with both internal CMSD leaders and external philanthropic, business, and government leaders has helped me break down silos and create a community of believers and access to the CEO and the work of the district. In closure, I truly feel that I have a unique skill set and experiences that have helped me develop my career, and along with the love of my husband and family, feel that they've helped me shape who I am today as somebody who's an energetic executive, looking forward to continue the mission of developing and supporting the community. My priorities in this role are simple: to make sure all of our partners hear from us, that we listen to them, and that we are offering better services at a lower cost while expanding opportunities for everyday Cuyahoga County residents and our partners. Once again, Council President, thank you for this chance to address the council, and I welcome any comments or questions.
Thank you very much. Who's first? Go ahead.
Through the chair to Ms. Pomerantz. I loved you put a little different twist than we're used to. So if you wouldn't mind restating your 3 top priorities that you just listed.
Sure.
I'm sorry.
No, that's great. So my 3 top priorities, priority number 1 would be to meet with the county council members, their staff individually, and also with each suburban mayor and relevant public and non-governmental entities to introduce myself, learn more about the context of what their priorities are, and to listen to their aspirations for their communities. I want to learn more how they interact with the county and in what ways that interaction can be fortified, supported, deepened, or even in some cases initiated. And then through those first round of introductions, I'd like to make sure that my second priority is including timed and frequent communication so that they understand the role of this department, and that they know that this department can be a place they can collectively identify opportunities, frame problem solving, and gain access to the county resources to improve collaboration and cooperation, and most importantly, shared services when it fits. And my third priority is to immediately connect with the 2019 budgeting process and with our county departments and leadership team to more fully understand where issues and opportunities already exist, and to take those opportunities and also understandings of where their limitations are and communicate that back directly to those stakeholders. So those would be my first 3 priorities. And then I would just want to add in anything to the any of the initiatives the county executive adds on.
And you stated as number 2, time and frequent communication. So in your role, do you see that you will be able to complete that yourself? How do you plan on communicating the back and forth and the frequency that you need? Do you plan on utilizing our Armin's communication department?
Well, thanks for that question. And through the president, I'm very lucky that my deputy director comes from the communications department, Ms. Janae Holly. So I do expect that the 2 of us will be able to hopefully manage these first step of priorities at the beginning and do that listening tour throughout the county regions with their groups. That said, I expect to work very closely with the communication department and any other members of council or the executive team to support ensuring that quality communication. I hope that's satisfactory to the
Last question for me to start would be, I don't know if you're familiar or have been following a regional issue around here is transportation in this county, and we have had a sub kind of transportation committee for about a year. We've had a report, and I believe now we have transportation will now be a committee that will be added on with Councilwoman Baker. So what are your thoughts? And we're still working on it currently. Right now, we are trying, where we left off is to have a stakeholder, an outside stakeholder committee that will follow up on this transportation, take some of our things that have come from our report, as well as to push down state for some of the changes that it has impacted with MCO sales tax here, and as well as RTA. So I don't know if you've had conversations with the county executive that is one of a top priority in terms of council, as well as the residents around Cuyahoga County. So, do you have any feelings about that or any discussion?
Well, I was fortunate enough in my current role to work on a lot of transportation issues. One of the big budgetary things that Cleveland Schools often is in need of is to find different ways to advocate for transportation costs because of the working with some of our more rural districts down in the downstate. It helps to understand where the partners are that also need these needs. So I would like to think and consider supporting this request by looking toward other communities and counties that are like ours, that have these big urban districts where transportation is an issue, and not settling only on those urban areas, but also looking in places where they have to, people have to use transportation to get places. I would consider working with the current members that are appointed to the board of RTA and others, including yourself and Councilwoman Baker, any ways that I can support finding and advocating for funding that is needed to ensure that we're transporting our citizens from county.
Okay, and I just want to add, before I'm quiet and open it up to my other colleagues, is that during that process, we did have a letter sent out downstate from various other elected officials around this county. I believe it was roughly 125 or more that
Great.
signed on to that. So just opening that up, Tiffany can share that information with you, so you'll at least know who was on board and advocating for that as well.
And Councilman, if there are priorities for the council members that they would like to include in terms of when I reach out to the first list of the suburban mayors and all of the politicals, any other ideas and entities that you'd like me to consider, that'll be something that when we first start meeting with you that I'd like to add on to those lists. I also was fortunate that one of the board members, Leo Serrano, for RTA, was my next door neighbor at the CMSD office, so he's kept me quite in touch with some of the consistent needs of RTA and also some of the management issues that they've been having, that I hope that once they get through that we'll be able to look for more funding. But that said, I need to take a deeper dive before that.
Thank you, Councilman Jones. Councilman Simon.
Thank you, Council President. Michelle, congratulations on getting this far in the process. And don't really have a question, but just want to acknowledge the fact that we certainly have worked together in your time at CMSD and our work with our CTAG initiative and the city CTAG initiative. So I know what you bring to the table.
Thank you.
So I appreciate that. I just really wanted to emphasize your first point of meeting with the council. I think it's important that from the administrative side, feel comfortable in coming to our side and knowing where our heads are and the thoughts that the council people desire to share with you, and that in itself will benefit you tremendously, and I think the administration and council as well.
Well,
to
thank you.
bridge that-
And
to have
Councilman,
that
if you
as a
need anything more with the
purpose.
CTAG initiative, my phone still rings back at CMSD and make sure that it happens. But
So I knows the inside. Great.
Thank you.
Great. All right. Thank you.
plan to do that.
Councilman Simon.
So congratulations on the nomination.
Thank you.
And I understand that you have a background in education, but what new ideas or initiatives would you like to see for a county Department of Regional Collaboration?
Well, Councilwoman, even though I have that education background, I want to make sure that part of that understands that with working at Cleveland School District in the capacity that we ran a small city there, whether it's operations, day-to-day functioning, getting kids to school on time, transportation, financing, facilities planning. I'd like to think that my initiatives around this will include some of the good work that's already happening with regionalism. I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. So some of the initiatives that I'd like to see is to make sure that both healthcare that we're working on currently, the public works, as well as the EMS and 911 call centers, learn more of how those things are working and making sure that they're working well for all communities, not just the ones who are currently utilizing the services. Making sure also that we consider the Department of Regional Services could be considered both with shared services around safety and shared services around things that everyday Cuyahoga County citizens want in their world. So safety might be the first thing that I'd like to start working on.
Okay, can you be more specific?
I'd like to meet with Brandy and know a little bit more about how the 911 call centers work and learn more about ways that we can utilize the law director and the sheriff's department so that communities that are not regionalizing yet understand what the opportunities are around them while still protecting their unique identities of their community. I'd also like to get to know a little bit more about the county jail system that's currently being in place with the city of Cleveland. And beyond that, I'd like to wait until I get my feet wet before I kind of say which direction I'd like to have this department work.
Can you identify some challenges facing cities in our county that perhaps you can assist with some new ideas and initiatives?
So I would think the biggest challenge that we have right now is the continued cuts from the state, from local government fund. And I think that one of the things that my strengths could be used is to be advocate, to help make sure that the state of Ohio and all of the other counties and citizens and municipalities are getting some of that money back, so that they're not focused on the day-to-day work and that we're able to have some more funding that can help some new initiatives. I just want to make sure that we're not going to new initiatives, that we're doing what we need to do and doing it well in this department and then take on new and bigger opportunities. But again, the biggest challenge I think still is the state's de-emphasizing of funding in the local municipalities.
And an additional question regarding your role, I understand will include boards and commission appointments.
Yep.
And what, if anything, do you have in a plan to vet and recruit candidates properly for those boards and commissions?
So I've already spoken a little bit to the county executive and also to his executive assistant, Ms. Laura Roach, and want to make sure that I provide a smooth transition for those board appointments that are not yet or are ready to have their term up, make sure that they are reappointed where they can be, and then develop with my deputy director and the county executive a list of questionnaires that will help us find more diverse candidates, as well as recommendations from the suburban area mayors to help see which ways we can bring those residents that have had voice and opportunities to participate in city and local government, to have them be part of that vetting process.
Do you know what the backlog is for appointments?
I don't know specifically, but I do know that there's some that need to be caught up on right away.
Councilwoman, Councilman Miller, and then Councilman Shaw.
Mr. President, Ms. Pomerantz, first, congratulations on your appointment to this very important position, and I welcome any help that you can give us on our intergovernmental work with the transportation issue, which is also very near and dear to my heart. Ms. Simon touched on one of the areas that I was particularly interested in, which is the backlog on filling appointments to boards and commissions, and another area that traditionally has been part of this role is the liaison between the executive and the county council. Is it your understanding that that will also be part of your responsibilities?
It is my understanding, and I think based on the success that I feel that I've had at the Cleveland Metropolitan School District doing that exact job between the CEO, Cleveland City Council, and the other entities, that I feel I've been able to gather a lot of information, a lot of opportunities to learn more about cooperation, and living in that role in between the two agencies that I think benefits both agencies, both the county executive as well as council. So yes, that would be my role.
And Mr. President, Ms. Pomerantz, what do you feel that you could do to help ensure a better flow of information between the executive and the council, so that we're not hearing things second or third hand that we should hear firsthand?
Well, I think I'm going to be meeting with Chief of Staff and the county executive soon to help find out ways that I can work with the communications department as well as the other chiefs to find ways the information most succinctly. I understand and have been a very big advocate, especially to a tough district like Cleveland, in sharing information and finding ways to share information first and foremost with those people that are impacted by that information, whether it's council members, whether it's legislative leaders, but specifically one of the roles that I did at Cleveland Schools, and I think very well, was making sure that there were no surprises and that members of Cleveland City Council knew before a change in a board recommendation, or knew what was happening, even to the level of whether there were going to be new principals in schools, whether there were going to be a bond accountability or a levy. I worked hard to make sure that the relationship was such, whether it was text, email, phone call, that this happened, there were no surprises. And then also I'd like to be able to develop that trust and relationship with all of you so that I can work back with my chiefs to be able to understand and make sure that there are no barriers to what progress and initiatives that you all would like to move forward with.
Mr. President, Ms. Pomerantz, I would just share that I don't think this particular role has been performed well under the new government so far, so I'm looking for a large improvement, and I'm going to do my part and work with you and try to help really develop this into a way of improving the communications between the executive and the council.
Well, thank you, and I'm ready. And I do hope that I will be able to have all of your personal cells and vice versa. So if there's any way of whatever preferred method of communication that you have, that we can get started with that.
And one other area of inquiry, in terms of the collaboration work that we've done, the county has done way more work with the municipalities than with the school district. And so my question is based on your particular background, are there areas where you believe we could expand collaboration between the Cuyahoga County and the Cleveland School District and the other school districts in the county?
Well, I think there's going to be a great opportunity with Say Yes to Education, which is an initiative that we expect to see happening hopefully around October, November of this school year. And that initiative has the intersection of the county government, the mayor of Cleveland, and the Cleveland School District to help support scholarships that will be available for all students who graduate from Cleveland schools. And while I think that alignment and that collaboration and cooperation and shared resources to help develop children before they get to the scholarship opportunity, so that they're having wraparound services, whether it's health or after-school programming, tutoring, to get them to that graduation level, I think that's going to be an opportunity for us to be able to see how that works. I know that the county executive and CEO Gordon and Mayor Jackson and the philanthropic groups and the unions are working collectively to help support ways to improve education, improve the support services, and then have that carrot at the end where everyone who graduates ready for college or career have that opportunity for a matching scholarship dollar. What that means to me is, if looking through and seeing how that rolls out and how it works, there's a Brookings Institute discussion on that said it's going to be crucial and critical for the leadership around that, as well as a group that are decision makers, not just people that meet and talk about the ideas, which academics unfortunately love to do, but to actually move that around. That may be a model that we can look at and see which ways we can support those services toward other school districts if and when they're interested. The one thing, I know a lot about education issues and policies, and I've also worked very collaboratively with suburban school districts and leaders around there. And as there's changes coming from the federal government and the state government, I'd like to see the county have maybe some best practices or resource opportunities that can help. But while the Say Yes initiative is starting and forming, I think it would be really crucial for members of council as well as myself and my department to see how it's going, what things are working, to be able to take those successes and also to encourage any, when you talk about a county and a school district and a city and a lot of different middle managers and frontline workers trying to find ways that you can encompass supporting the family, whether it's legal clinics, after-school tutoring, health services, everyone can be very territorial. And so as we see the way this rolls out and the breakdown of it, I think there's opportunities for lessons to be learned that we could take when ready to other suburban opportunities. And I think one of the other things I can bring to this role is every community that has a school district, if there's any ways I can support through them or advocate with them some of those things that we need in Northeast Ohio, I think that would be helpful.
Miller. Next, we have Councilman Schron and then Councilman Hauserman.
Thank you, Mr. President. You indicated you had three priorities, the second one, which was to understand the role of the department, at least. Tell me what the role of the department is.
The role of the department is to promote collaboration and cooperation among the subgroups, municipalities, and all the government entities to provide cost sharing and better quality of services, and provide opportunities through that partnership to expand the roles and the greater good of the community.
And following up on Mr. Miller's comment, which ones of those are we doing well?
I think we're doing okay. And again, small analysis.
You
to
said
start.
well and not so well, so I'm just trying to go back to your words that you said.
My
you want to
words.
reinforce the ones that we're doing well. And
I think Public Works is one that we're doing well on. I think that from what I've seen very early on, the idea of regionalizing around bridges and road repairs. I think that one of the other things that is going well from my first reading is the 911 call centers and able to provide services regardless, instead of for wherever, regardless of who's going to be there in that communication system.
are you aware that your predecessor actually fought that?
I'm not. But if it's going well, I would think that we would want to continue it. And I think I'd like to learn more about what other things that aren't going well, why. If it's not going well because people aren't interested, that's one thing. If it's not going well because there were costs that were unforeseen, that's another one. I think that there's some work that probably needs to be done around the healthcare issue. I think there may have been some bumps in the road, and so I'd like to learn more about ways that can provide savings, but also quality healthcare, and not see any management that has to happen from the county side that would get us into the healthcare business instead of actually just providing shared services.
One of the early sensitive collaboration issues came up over economic development. Your thoughts in regards to tax incentives to encourage people to bring from one community to another outside the county into the county?
Can you state that question again?
We'll use the term that the less popular version, poaching.
Oh, I did see about the poaching issue. Yeah, I read about that. That was part of the first person that had this role. And I think that I read about it. I know that it was something that was real exciting at the time. I don't know exactly if it's something that is all that popular right now. And so as a liaison, I want to make sure that I'm not pushing things that I'm going to look to the experts, both county council and the chiefs and the county executive, and not necessarily continue to push on something that is not wanted or warranted now. I think the idea at the time and not the newness of this government seemed probably like a great idea. But as with most things, in more context and actually execution of a policy, that maybe it didn't end up where it would need it to be. So I think I'd have to look more into that before I make any decisions, but it would not be one of my top priorities.
Do you have an opinion as to whether it's a good idea to encourage through tax incentives to bring businesses in from outside one district into this district?
Well, competition amongst the county, I think, is ultimately not necessarily beneficial for the county as a whole. I'd look at it in terms of schools. We try to We want to recruit kids to Cleveland schools. That's one of the main priorities. But we don't want to recruit kids to this new school that's in Councilman Matt Zone's area, and we'll take them from that school district, or from that area over to Councilwoman Donna Brady's area. That kind of poaching doesn't necessarily help the community as a whole. So offering tax incentives or incentives to parents to pick a Cleveland school from the outside, this is how I kind of can relate to this question. I'm not sure it benefits the county as a whole. In terms of any kind of cost incentives, I'm not sure that we want to, I think that we have a, is your question to have people from outside the county come in?
That's question one, but you can only anticipate what the next one's going to be, so.
I don't know if I have an opinion on that yet. I'd have to
Okay.
kind of see what it looks like. And again, if it's going to bring more business and more economic opportunity to the county, it would be something that would be great. But what are the shortcomings and pitfalls of that policy? And who are the losers? I think I need to know who those were before I would say if I recommended it or not.
Okay, then the same question as far as intra-county.
Oh, I don't know about that. I think that, again,
You're going to be leading this department, so you're going to.
I know. I mean, well, thank you. I hope so.
Correct.
No, I don't think that would be a good idea at this time in this county.
Okay, the other major one that was one of your predecessors had moved down the path on was consolidation of communities.
Well, I would take the county executive's lead on this and would not want to consolidate any communities without them wanting to do that themselves. I think that the opportunity around relationship building, communication, and deepened relationship between county council, that perhaps there's some communities that may want this, but it would not be something that I would mandate or have done to them. It would be something that through shared services, through better quality opportunities, through the changes that are coming through the next gubernatorial candidate, if it's something that a community wants, it would be something that I think we would be supportive of. But I think it's important to recognize that each unique identity of each individual community is going to be very important. We've consolidated schools where communities were really not happy, but providing something better. We did this with taking out of service a school is very hard. So when you consolidate, you've got people that are real emotionally attached. If it's something that makes sense to them fiscally, if it's something that the community is rolled out and buys into, it might be something worth trying, but I don't think that it'll be my role to demand collaboration of communities unless it's something that the communities seek to do.
And again, your predecessor did feel that was something that was appropriate to be pushed by the Department of Collaboration. So I'm just asking your opinion, because.
My opinion is at this time that would not be one of my considerations.
And how about school districts, because it came up from Mr. Miller? Consolidation of school
Wow.
district.
Well, I think ultimately opportunities to share services around school districts to cut costs that each school district has would be great, but it's the idea of doing the consolidation would be really, you'd have to know very well and do a lot of community listening towards to see which school communities would want to be consolidated. And I think with respect to the municipalities, it'd have to be something that would also be driven by their city leaders before it'd be something that I would want to take up.
So neither of these are philosophies that you're bringing to this as far as consolidation?
Not at this time. I think it's really important for me to get in and listen and learn before I make those decisions. And that's one of the things I was successful at in my other roles.
Yeah, I was just kind of curious on your example of if somebody moved from Councilman Zone to Councilman Brady's, a school teacher, or I mean, a student,
family.
if that would not necessarily be good. That's what I thought you said.
I would support that family's choice in ways that would not pull all the students from one councilman's ward to support to another. And then hopefully find ways for that other council person to attract and retain students in their area.
Because that's what actually happens when consolidation takes place. That it might find out that the best move to.
And if that's the best move, then we make sure it happens expediently and we do it with supporting services for those who are being left and those who are leaving and left behind.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Hausman and then Councilman Tuma.
Again, Michelle, congratulations. I've worked with you in the past, so I'm familiar with all the good work you do. I also think you have a great deputy director, and Janae Holly, who has years of county government experience. So between the two of you guys, I think you should be able to hit the ground running. My question is here in Cotw County, Michelle, we're finding that a lot of our departments don't keep metrics, and if they do, they keep bad metrics. What tools do you plan to use to keep metrics for your department?
Thank you, Councilman, and I did enjoy getting a chance to work with you all those years. So I would define success of my position in this department by the level of collaboration achieved, the increase of quality of life as defined by expectations from local residents, and my success model will include the following questions. Has my department consistently been responsive in communication with our partners, especially including our members of council? Are we listening to their feedback? Have our partners been informed consistently of our needs and our offerings? And are we making progress on those joint efforts? Are we championing the county's initiatives? And are we making sure that we complete and support the goals of the county charter? I also feel that those would be my initial metrics to kind of see. And I've worked in a school district that everything is measured. If you pay attention to it, if you measure it. So I'd like to also kind of get to a point of a communication plan that measures how many touches we've made with each community, in which ways they have increased their level of county service, idea around county service, as well as who is using the county services and sharing their cost savings. So those would be the metrics that I would like to consistently use to support.
My second question, Michelle, is I'm sure you have talked with both Eddie and Carlton about this position. I hope you have. What were some of the key takeaways from those conversations?
Be nice to council. A lot of their takeaways were to, get to meet folks, understand some of the priorities and context of what has happened in the past and what may make people a little more skeptical to jump in and consolidate services in the future. Another thing was they both had said to me if there was anything that I needed to do to reach out to them to help provide support or connections to making meetings. My philosophy is to attend as many meetings as I need to, but actually to get past just the going and actually get starting to doing the execution of making sure that my schedule is filled with meetings that are beneficial to the goals of the charter and not just the meetings that are, supporting other members. Does that make sense?
A little bit. Just to say what Councilman Miller said, just a little nicer. I think between Janae's experience and your connections, I think you guys have a unique opportunity to really make this department your own. And so I wish you success, and anything I can do to help, just let me know.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Hauser. And Councilman Tuma.
All right. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for being here this afternoon, and congratulations on your nomination. I have a question. You talked about communicating being a big part of what you feel your duties entail, and I would agree with that. I think everybody up here would agree with that. How do you plan to go about introducing yourself to the various elected officials in all 50-plus communities in our county? It's obviously a big county. Different communities participate in different ways. Some mayors like to take the lead on things. Other mayors like to, have their duties taken over by other people in this particular area. So, what is your introduction going to be like to these various communities? Are you going to send out letters or make phone calls or actually go out to communities?
I plan to do in-person meetings with as many people as possible, and also attending where need be some of those city council meetings that they have in their communities, just to kind of get an idea of what the priorities are. I also have, what I find with working with elected officials is meeting them where they're at. So if somebody really is, very formal and understanding that the staff sets up an appointment, just trying to reach out and ensure that I at least do 3 touches within the first 6 months in person, and then follow up, and then phone call. And I have been I've got a lot of tenacity in terms of getting in front of folks, but also being able to understand that if it's not my term, my face or my space that works, perhaps it'll be my deputy director. If people are actually busy during the summer months, they're not really looking forward to opportunities to connect face to face, see which ways I can communicate with their staff, their chief of staffs, and their council to be able to be supportive of getting that chance to say who I am, understand the role of what I do, and also to make sure that I get an understanding of what the priorities are. So face-to-face, carnivals, festivals, connections to the leaders that I already have, and then any connections between you and any of your communities would be helpful.
Okay, and I appreciate that last part. I would think that everybody up here would like to have an ongoing dialogue with you. I don't know that that's been the case. Well, I know you say no kidding, but I don't know that that's always been the case up here.
Well, if you wanted to do some introduction meetings together with members of council, I'll drive, you guys can ride, or vice versa, whatever way that makes it as easy as possible to help them understand, especially in your home districts, what those priorities are.
Right, and I think it'd also be helpful if there is a particular issue affecting a particular district, that council person is apprised of that and also participates in problem solving or being proactive if they can be. So I think that'd be important. Just a question in general, would you describe yourself as a policy facilitator or a policy driver?
I can be both.
You can be both?
I've
Okay.
done both.
Explain, give me an example of each.
So policy initiator, I've helped create policy and legislation down at the State House that would help expand the use of, it's value add. It's an education term that's used to help make sure that everybody's, a student is in a teacher's classroom, that they have added value.
Okay.
Meaning if you're start third grade with Mrs. Pomerantz and you end third grade with Mrs. Pomerantz, that you've had a year's worth of academic growth. So I've had opportunities where I've written that policy, checked it back in with my experts back at the CMSD, vetted it through, introduced it in legislation, and then moved it forward to make sure that all the stakeholders and the questions and all the other different suburban go to other districts understand what it plainly means for them into supporting their the needs of advancing children. So I've done that. I've also done the liaisoning part, where if it's something, I'll use another example. Right now in Cleveland, we're working with the master facilities plan to build 23 more schools. We're having some difficulty with the Ohio Facilities Commission on getting those 23 schools built at the cost that we had thought we'd agreed upon in 2014. So I facilitate that policy. I do not create that policy, but I make sure the connections, the communication, and the follow-up continues to happen so that this topic stays on the radar and doesn't just go away. But also, I don't get in the way of writing that policy. I just make sure to try to pull in the connections and maximize that opportunity to push the agenda forward. Does that give
Yeah, no, I
good
think
examples?
I appreciate that. Yeah, I have no further questions. Thank you.
Councilwoman Beck?
Thank you, Mr. President. And again, congratulations on the nomination.
Thank you.
Couple things, I guess, in listening to my colleagues that I perhaps would like to expand upon. We talk about, more funding and more money needed and things like that. But when I look at regional collaboration in that title, it seems to me that it is more about collaborating among our cities and our townships, understanding the value of shared services, understanding the county resources that perhaps may be duplicated in a city that can use the county instead.
Yep.
We have dispatch centers now that, because of perhaps efficiencies, we now are under one roof making 911 calls instead of each individual city. Perhaps there could be collaborative efforts with fire stations and police stations and all the different things that everyone needs. But we perhaps, as you said earlier, we're territorial.
Yep.
So, outside of the more funding fight, where do you balance and how are you going to promote, especially through the communication, all the services that the county offers, all the different perhaps ideas that come from all of the cities that have come together in trying to collaborate among themselves in sharing services, maybe rubbish removal, snow removal, all kinds of equipment services. There's a lot of different ways under pressure of not having the funding to find ways to save and perhaps be better for it because we have learned to regionally collaborate. Where do you find yourself in that conversation when you go out and talk to the different mayors and leaders of our community?
Well, I think that would probably be part of priority number 2. Priority number 1 is get to know them, understand what their context is and what opportunities and also shortcomings that they may have. I think in priority number 2 is when I'll be able to and again, with my deputy director, who's from the communications, is to be able to kind of simply put together some of the menu of options that they could use. And then with that gentle nudging to kind of say, understanding that sometimes when there are budget shortfalls from the state, that those lemons can be turned into lemonade, to understand ways you can try things that are beneficial in terms of cost cutting, and hopefully bring down some of those fears or worries about always having that one identity. I think it's a twofold. I think it's important to show the state of Ohio that we are doing our best to understand the ways to maximize efficiency, but it's also important to understand that when we are maximizing our efficiency, to continue to ask the state of Ohio just to go back and ask, and you served there in the legislature, just to ask without a solution is not a success, will not be successful. So to understanding and finding those courageous partners and communities that are ready to go forward and to look at some of those would be very helpful to me. I just don't want to, I don't think it would be good to start this role and saying, this is what we're gonna do, we're gonna consolidate these 3 cities. As we have done in Cleveland schools with consolidating schools and school staff, it's understanding and knowing about their issues and why. But I do see some of the detrimental effects of the state and their cost cutting to be an opportunity to help provide some solutions to communities that may not have otherwise wanted them.
Right. Okay, that, if I may, that's good to hear. I mean, we certainly, cities have their own identity.
Yep.
And in ways that they're territorial sometimes define themselves. But we also have found that perhaps blending the borders a bit so that we can cross them and help each other and find ways of saving dollars and working together with 50, 60 different cities that are here in Cuyahoga County only seems to make sense.
Yes.
And sometimes only comes when there's a need to do it.
I would agree, and like I said, the experience of providing something better and sharing costs, I think will help drive that as well. When we work to decide and determine which schools we're going to close, it's really hard to tell a family that your grandfather went there, your brother went there, you love the school cafeteria worker there, that this current school building is not offering the same opportunities as one nearby does, but understanding that emotional ties and respecting it, but also moving forward with a plan that helps support a improved quality setting, I think is going to be key.
All right, thank you. I'm glad to hear that. One other question I had on a different topic, and I know my colleague Gallagher has brought this up a few times. The growing number of senior services and senior members of our community is only going to be more and more part of what we will have to deal with here on County Council and our budgets. There certainly are good things that a senior can bring to the table, but there's also many times costs, and our senior centers across the county are struggling right now in trying to provide those services. What are your thoughts in how we're going to manage our senior services as time goes on? And where do you think we're going to be going with our budget? Is it going to be expanding it? Do you find ways of, again, collaborating with all of our senior centers across Cuyahoga County in ways that perhaps can save dollars there? It's kind of on the other end of the spectrum of where you came from in children and education.
Right.
So what are your thoughts when you think about the elderly community and what challenges we have ahead with them?
Councilwoman, this is a topic that I haven't considered much, but I do know growing up that my grandmother loved the Garfield Heights Senior Center, and she would go dancing with her friends, and always on Thursday nights, she was at the Senior Center. And one day she would find out with her little friends, and they would go to the Bedford Senior Center, and then they did a dance on Saturdays. And so since dancing was her thing, I know that it was really important to her quality of life. I think it helped her live a lot longer. I think, as I mentioned earlier, priority number 3 would be looking at the 2019 budgeting process. My worry, just off the cuff, would be to make sure that it's still convenient for my grandma's, it appears that for everyone's grandma to be able to have some place that they feel safe and welcoming, and the transportation to be able to be provided. I think you need to be sensitive to that fact that when you're in your community, you want to spend time with the folks that are around you. So I wouldn't want to move everybody around, but I do think that there's opportunities to align quality services that would be attractive to folks, and it would be something that I would consider making sure to provide better, if not, it's got to be that it's either got to be better or cost savings, and hopefully in this case it would be able to be both.
If I may just follow that, services like the options program where we go to the homes because they're shut in, that need services outside of what they can take care of themselves. Senior center directors have been challenged with family members that move out of the county, out of the state for financial reasons, job reasons, and they're finding that governmental agencies are more taxing and needed to take care of those that are here. I think it's more than just the social piece.
Okay.
I think it is really very taxing and will only increase. I believe the last time we had a demonstration or a presentation by our senior community in front of us, I think we're 50% or more seniors here living in Cuyahoga County, and that's only to grow. So I guess I would ask that you give that some thought and maybe think about different ways we can expand upon the regionalism of our senior centers here in Cuyahoga County to provide the services that we know are taxing now and will continue to be taxing. And if you haven't given that much thought, to give that some thought, only because it's an issue that's not going to go away.
And that'll be something that I want to make sure that when we have our meeting together that we do a deeper dive on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
President.
Thank you. Ms. Pomerantz, again, congratulations.
Thank you.
I think that your background is going to be very helpful in terms of navigating this, in many ways, undefined role. And I know that's part of the challenge and difficulty of us discussing this in a lot of ways. But I think particularly your background in understanding the way the Ohio General Assembly works can be very, very, very helpful.
Great.
I'd like to just sort of, not just remind you, but anybody, that one of the things that we initiated in terms of regionalism was the charter itself, and the fact that we sat here as 11 different representatives from 11 different regions in the county is something that never existed in Cuyahoga County. So we are in many ways the most solid part of what regionalism as it exists in this county is.
Right.
I would like to, others have said most of what I had in mind to say to pay attention, as I'm sure you would, but in the past, and I mean the entire 7.5 years, keeping up with the board appointments and those things have not gone as well as they could have, and juggling different responsibilities may be part of the reason that that hasn't been given the attention that it's needed at times. We know it's always difficult to find people, however, to actually serve on these boards, so it's not to underestimate the challenge. Could you help me out a little bit with your, I know your background, but when I listen to you talk, I'm a little uncertain about where do you stop, where does your work in the past stop with the Cleveland School District and begin with the county, because it seems a little blurred.
Technically or theoretically?
You can take your shot at either one, but.
Well, technically, I would start tomorrow and kind of get on that board commissions and those appointment meetings right away. Theoretically, I think that my connections with the Cleveland schools as the workforce developers of the base of Northeast Ohio is going to continue to be important. I have someone who's taking my place currently at Cleveland Schools. I have expressed support for the CEO in terms of his OFCC initiative in any way I can to support, but that doesn't mean that it will detract or detour from my day-to-day job serving all of you, the residents of Cuyahoga County and the county executive. I'd like to think that it'd be something that I will be lock, stock, and barrel here, but if anybody needs any support with Cleveland Schools, I'd be able to give them the number of the person that replaced me.
I'm not saying that there's something incompatible or anything with it. It's a big part of Cuyahoga County. But as a Clevelander, I'd also like to just remind us all that this is county government.
Right.
And if we're not to slip into the parochialism of our districts, then we also have to keep in mind that this is about all the this is about all the communities and all the people across the county, and we don't want to be too. And I can say this and get away with it a little bit, I guess, cannot be too city centric about our approach to this job.
I appreciate those comments. I'm a Lakewood resident. I care, and I've got, my nieces are in Parma School District, and I care very much about them. They're at Valley Forge, and I will do my best to make sure that the county stays the focus and it's not Cleveland specific.
Well, I think you've got a lot to work with here, and this is not meant as a criticism of the position in the past, but I think you've heard little bits of this, and so just to put a point on it, during the entire 7.5 years, there have been several people who have had this position. Sometimes it's been unclear what the position was. Each individual brought something to it, but in fact, it's never really, in my opinion, been defined in a way that most people could explain what it was. I mean, you did a good job without even being here. But what I mean is, if you were to ask any of us who've been here for 7.5 years or since then, I think we might have a hard time explaining to someone else what the job is, because it's been so many different things. And the mix of council liaison and appointing boards and the concept of promoting regionalism where that makes sense and where it's smart, where it works, that's an awful lot. And just that part of it, it's an awful lot. And so I recognize that. So, wish you well with that, and look forward to interacting with you and talking to you about it and what experience we've gained since we've been here, about why this position in many cases doesn't seem to have ever been able to again define itself in a way that we were satisfied with, and I think that a lot of that has to do with well, let's just say that I think that we can do a better job in clarifying, what the responsibilities of this department are and how it interacts with the council and its other responsibilities.
And I appreciate that very much and look forward to continually growing in this role, but also being able to make sure that I stay true to what the charter was, and all of you that were, in my mind, very forward-thinking in creating this type of a role, understanding that with the state and federal government and the cost cutting, as well as an aging population, knowing full well that it was going to take a whole region, not just one person, to be able to help support these things. So I do find myself the kind of worker that does enjoy having a lot of different opportunities, and considering my past of that first grade teacher and that labor leader, wearing those type of hats, but also with the humbleness that doesn't necessarily mean I know everything in that hat, but also being that resource to be able to say, what can we continue to do better?
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Simon.
A couple follow-up questions that came to mind as we went through all of my colleagues. So your predecessor served in a capacity as both a regional collaborator and a city council person.
Yes.
And there was some perception that there was a conflict or could be, or appearance of a conflict of interest in that role, dual role. Do you have any affiliation or memberships that might create that same perception?
I'm currently a member of the board of the Boys and Girls Club, and that's something that I'm not sure if it's going to end up being able to continue or not. I find it very valuable. That said, I want to make sure that this is my number one priority. And in terms of affiliations or clubs, I mean, I do have a book club every once a month, but other than that, I really have made sure to step down from any responsibilities that would prevent me from doing a really good job at this.
And what book are you reading?
Oh, well, we went back to the past. This one we're reading The Right Stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, Tom Wolfe. You know, he passed away, and we wanted to kind of give an oldie. But I'll bring you a copy.
Okay. So I've always wanted to get a book club going here, just to some extent. So maybe we can collaborate with a book. But two
that
more
would be
quick.
great.
Yeah, Tom Byers has a book about the population decrease in the county, and I think that would be a valuable read for us. But schools, just two more questions. If do you see yourself as maybe looking at schools within the county to have opportunities to merge or share? I mean, we're looking at municipalities and all these different partners. What do you think about a school partnership?
I think school partnerships, as I mentioned earlier, would work if we're offering something that is better quality. If it's just cost savings and not better quality or better opportunities around making sure our workforce, not just education, not just sending folks on to college, but creating those jobs that for Ohioans today, it may be something, but I am reluctant to start pushing. I think the idea is to bring trust around seeing where it's working, which is why I think the Say Yes opportunity of shared governance may be an option to look at if it's successful. But I do think that the minute you start with a plan to say we're going to consolidate these schools, everybody gets all up in arms and becomes very worried about that. So I think that it has to be a natural kind of growth rather than a prescriptive, these communities look, and I think it has to be driven by data in terms of enrollment, in terms of capacity to offer the quality educational settings that are needed for today's careers. But it's something that I would not start recommending until there were some much more deep opportunities for engagement with the municipalities.
Okay. And lastly, so we had a merger study done in 2012 with colleague Chantel Brown's district, cities, Pepper Pike, Orange, Woodmere, and I think Moreland Hills. And that really didn't go anywhere. We had a study done through the Planning Commission with a grant, and it stopped and stalled. Do you have any knowledge of why that might have happened and how that could be helpful for us in the future if this were ever to be looked at again?
I think that anytime you do consolidation, there's issues of whose job is it and whose job is being taken away. I think that we live in a culture, come from a bureaucracy where the change culture can be intimidating, and it can be, Cleveland Schools right now is doing a reorg of their senior leadership, and the amount of fear of who's going to be my boss is, it's surprising to me. That said, understanding a little bit about what I know about that merger and speaking to a couple of officials around that, I think there were some labor issues that may have caused some stress. And being from a labor background and understanding the importance of labor, but also understanding the harmony that labor is supposed to be created around management and labor, not just one being overpowering of another, I think is really important to recognize. And while I'm not sure who were the ones who really wanted that merger and who were a little reluctant, the idea of the deepened relationships to be able to find out, well, what are your fears? What are your understanding? And listen to the concerns of those people that are impacted by that will be very important before trying something like that again. And again, I think, as I mentioned earlier, the idea of cost savings could overcome that feeling of wanting it my own way. And when you continuously point that out and some of the opportunities you can purchase to enhance your community by the savings of those costs, maybe it's the way that you package it and be able to support it. And having that integrity and genuine idea of, I trust that this is going to be happening and that you're going to be with them throughout the change, not just at the one saying, why don't you do it? Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Strawn, and then we're going to try to wrap up. So signal me if you have any last questions for the.
Okay, and Mr. Miller had brought up that he didn't think we've done a great job of collaborating with schools on the school side. It's, matter of fact, it very rarely gets discussed up here. And do you see that, you do see that as a role of this chair that you're sitting or will be sitting in anticipation?
I don't at this time unless it's specifically asked with regard to either Say Yes to Education or if it's a council member initiative. I think that my two predecessors were both attorneys, and coming from the education background, I want to be able to offer and support where it fits, but I also don't want to lead with making sure that I'm the education regional collaborator. I don't think that would necessarily be the ideal role for me at this time. But as I continue in the role, as I continue to get to know each of you and your communities, if it's something that people think that it would be could be a service of, I'd be happy to extend that.
I guess it was just trying to get back to Mr. Miller's, whether that's going to be a liaison. You said you're going to outreach to the communities, which are you planning on outreaching to the school districts on that same basis?
I think I would just outreach to the municipal leaders and see if they want, see where that want or need is for specific school issues. It won't be something I won't bring up, but I don't think I'll be able to do the job justice if I'm working on that school role specifically at the beginning.
Okay. And then to Ms. Simon's question about consolidation, when you get a merger, means more than likely something goes away, as you pointed out.
Yep.
With your background as a labor leader, what impact, if any, do you see from the Supreme Court last week being able to coordinate with what's anticipating to be 20, 30, 40% of those members that might be part of the consolidation group being dropped out, as to whether you would be able to show the same impartiality to those who are no longer part of that group and those who wanted to stay, if you see that as a part of the consolidation?
Thanks for that question. Understanding the heavy impact of Janus, which will be not felt specifically within the next 30 days, but will have an outcome, an impact on Cuyahoga County. It was not easy going from being a political leader in the local union and then at the national level being a union leader at the national level and then coming back to work for management. I have a few, scars on my elbow to prove it. I do feel that my loyalty is to the Cuyahoga County residents to support the voice of labor, but not to the extent where labor and not management aren't able to work together. So in terms of my loyalty to my union background, I think it's real important to understand that I've lived and worked in both spaces, and while I recognize the importance, the idea of the community as a whole with respect to the labor unions and the workers that were part of that, at the end of the day, it's how do you support Cuyahoga County residents and making sure that they have increased opportunities and that you respect the voice of labor, just as you would want labor to respect the voice of management, but no moving towards quality services and tech and financial incentives and not being beholden to one or the other management or labor group.
When you say labor, who is that?
I would say building trades, teachers unions, understanding those kind of union labor supports that were impacted by Janus' ruling.
So non-union labor is not, I'm just trying to find out, because you're going to have a big group, I think, when it's all said and done, who are not part of what you keep saying is labor. So I just want to identify how you're going to work with those that, I guarantee you, that group also considers themselves labor. And they don't.
Oh, yeah. So I don't know them, so I'm not sure, but I would imagine that I would have the same respect for anybody that's working and supporting a community, whether they're officially labor or part of this union or that union. At Cleveland Schools, we managed 9 labor unions and many who were not in the unions or not in labor, and being able to help support them regardless of whether their union affiliation, their faith-based affiliation, their work history, or even their longevity with the school, and understanding that the importance of moving the students academically forward and helping supporting the families of Cleveland was the goal, but also respecting the voice, whether it's non-union, non-labor, or any of those. I think a lot of it has to come with respect and understanding the context of why there could be some push and shove to that consolidation will help us unlock the answers to getting there.
Thank you.
All right. Ms. Pomerantz, do you have any final comments?
I just wanted to thank everybody at council today for giving me the opportunity to speak and helping me learn a lot more about the role through the questions that you've given me, and especially making sure that you understand that I've been very excited to get here at this point. I think that you all do an amazing job. I look forward to reporting to the county executive, but also learning and growing through all of you and all of your leadership. So thanks again. And again, the questions, I feel that I will be able to go back and reflect on and hopefully be able to support any of the ones I got wrong or didn't get right all the way, to be able to learn more along the way.
Thank you very much. All right. Could I have a motion to recommend Resolution 2018-0121 to the full council for consideration for second reading adoption under suspension of the rules?
So moved.
Second.
And seconded. Clerk, would you please? No, you know what? We're going to have a voice vote. Is there any parliamentary? Am I leaving out any parliamentary?
No, Mr. President.
Is she right, Councilman Miller? Just kidding. You got to be here a while to get some of this. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, the ayes have it. Resolution is adopted.
Council President, I'd just like to go on the record. That was an abundance of cautions because of our personal relationship and the advisement of our law department. That's recusing myself from this
All right,
vote.
the Councilwoman Brown is recusing herself. Thank you, Councilwoman.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again.
Very much. Thank you very much. Any miscellaneous business? Seeing none, we are adjourned. The regular council meeting will begin in 10 minutes.